If you love video games, then you might be a fan of RPGs. If you love RPGs, then I would wholeheartedly recommend the multi-award-winning Metaphor ReFantazio. And if you do play Metaphor, then you will eventually meet Heismay Noctule. Everybody loves this guy, but to even start talking about why would be a spoiler. Let's roll that title. He's a party member, and yes, even that is a spoiler for some people. You'll see. Heismay isn't just a party member though. He's a lot of people's favorite party member, and for good reason. His design stands out from the crowd, he covers the sneaky rogue class, and his story is as heartbreaking as it is heartwarming.
I could not even protect my own flesh and blood. Who could call me a knight?
But before we can focus on Heismay, I need to give a brief overview of Metaphor itself. It's required knowledge for anyone who's watching this video but hasn't actually played the game. You already got your spoiler warning. It's also a good refresher for anyone who needs one. Here we go. Metaphor ReFantazio is set in the United Kingdom of Uchronia, an alliance of 3 different countries. In those countries, there are 9 tribes, each of which have their own distinct features. The Clemar have horns, the Rusant have huge elf ears, and the Ishkia have vestigial wings, just as a few quick examples. Those tribal characteristics will be important later. The narrative kicks off with the death of the current king, and several contenders step forward to claim his seat for themselves. But this isn't a Game of Thrones style war for the kingdom. Thanks to the former king's magic, the next ruler will be decided by a popular vote. It's democratic, and the protagonist and their party are in the running.
Do we have an Elden boy present? Come on, let's see a face.
Heismay becomes the 3rd permanent addition to the party, and for a lot of Metaphor fans, he's the best one. Don't just take my word for it though. If you're wondering why I'm back in the Reddit zone, it's because I wanted to ask the fans themselves. I did it before with my Persona 3 Reload video, so I figured I'd do it again with its cousin. I asked Reddit to tell me why everyone loves Heismay, and a few people gave the objectively correct answer. But seriously, there were some really insightful comments in the thread, and they'll guide us through this big question. So, why does everyone love Heismay? From a basic design perspective, Heismay already stands out from the crowd. He's a Eugief, and that tribe looks the most distinct from all the others because they're not even human. When I say human here, I mean how the tribes look like us in the real world, not human in the Hieronymus Bosch monster sense. No, the Eugief are basically bat people. A lot of the Reddit responses focused on this, and how the Eugief getup makes Heismay stand out from moment one. The way he hangs from the ceiling in Magla Hollows is one of the best examples. Everyone else is sitting around the table, taking a break from dungeon delving, and his relaxed pose is upside down, true to his bat-like nature. Hand in hand with that, he's got big red eyes that let him see in the dark, massive ears that help him hear well beyond the normal range, wide wings that allow him to glide through the air, and claw feet that he uses to, knead dough on top of the cooking table. Also, for being a little guy, he has some serious gravitas when he speaks. I hear some Alan Rickman in there personally.
We're nocturnal, we look worlds apart, and there's so few of us.
Heismay's design stands out from the crowd in Metaphor, but it's even more noteworthy when you hold it up alongside developer Atlus's Persona series, which, to be fair, has so much overlap with Metaphor that the Venn diagram is basically a circle. Anyway, the reason is because Heismay is what we'd call a mascot character. Persona 3 had Koromaru the dog, 4 had Teddy the bear, and 5 had Morgana the cat. But to say Metaphor has Heismay the bat would be a major disservice to the character. If you polled Persona fans, many would say that mascots don't get quite the same level of emotional writing. It would have been really easy for Atlus to make Heismay a one-dimensional goofball whose most distinguishing quirk is a fear of bugs.
It's just an insect.
Mascots are, however, just as useful in combat as any other party member. Given his nimble, nocturnal nature, Heismay is perfectly suited to be the textbook rogue. Metaphor ReFantazio calls this class the Thief. Classes in Metaphor are dubbed archetypes. They're almost like myths, individuals with storied abilities that seem to echo throughout time. As Moore, the mysterious academic, puts it,
archetypes represent the power of a true hero.
You might be asking how a thief could represent something heroic. Putting aside the myriad gentleman thieves in books and movies, also the entire theme of Persona 5, there's some serious combat utility there. Archetypes have elemental affinities that can be used to exploit enemy weaknesses. It's pretty fitting that thieves use dark elemental magic. They can also steal treasure from enemies mid-fight, or sap their health and mana for themselves. That can all be seen as heroic from certain perspectives.
Regard this not as the art of deception, but rather how to steal hearts. The morally sound way, of course.
But if you ask Reddit, you're going to see one answer more than any other. The thief's dodge ability is clutch. Battles in Metaphor aren't just about swinging your blade or casting spells. If you can't take a big hit, then you have to dodge it. And that's exactly what a heroic thief would do. Now, you can understand why dodging an attack and not taking damage is generally good in an RPG. You lose all your health, you go down. But there's an extra bonus for dodging in Metaphor, in the same vein as the Persona and Shin Megami Tensei games before it. Both you and the enemy get a set number of turn icons in each round of combat. Usually it's one per character, but that can be increased or decreased depending on how things go. Hit an enemy's weakness, and you'll add an extra half turn to your action list. But if your attack misses, you lose 2 instead of the usual 1. It's even worse if the attack is repelled or absorbed. That'll make you lose 4 turns, which basically gives the enemy another full round.
I'll cut you down! Oh, please!
Yikes! Watch out for their counterattack!
The good news is that this works both ways. Any attack you dodge cuts an extra turn from the enemy's stock. Heismay and his thief archetype are built with this in mind, and his endgame abilities take it to the extreme. If you fully explore Heismay's thief tree, and spend some time with the gunner and merchant as well, you can unlock the Royal Thief. This epic level archetype has some incredible passives that make it hard for an enemy to even land a hit, reducing their attack rate while also boosting your own agility. The odds are already stacked in the Royal Thief's favor, and if they manage to dodge even one enemy attack, they will completely wipe all of the enemy's turn icons. It doesn't matter how many enemies are on screen, it doesn't matter if it's a boss fight, one dodge, and it's right back to your party.
Heismay is basically untouchable in the endgame. I bet he feels like a hairless cat though.
We literally just talked about an endgame archetype, and I gave that spoiler warning back at the start of the video, but as a heads up, this is where we start digging into the story stuff. Remember that Backstreet Boys joke from earlier? Well, it's actually pretty appropriate. Heismay's backstory is a heartache, but things don't stay that way. If you spend some time in my Reddit thread, you'll see that a lot of the longer comments talk about this. Remember those 9 tribes I mentioned earlier? Well, there's a societal hierarchy based on their unique features, but Heismay and the Eugief are firmly planted at the bottom. They are the most different, the most isolated, and the most discriminated. The world is against Heismay, and when he's first introduced, so are we.
On top of his past crimes, Heismay has stooped to abducting our wee ones, our children.
To make an impression in the royal election, the hero and his party decide to hunt down a child kidnapper known as Heismay. Children are disappearing from the old castle town of Martira, and he's the culprit. At least, that's what the guards and Martira's Lady Joanna say. So we trek out to the sandworm dens to find him. Along the way, we have to deal with Homo Butera, a particularly nasty human sandworm. After a brief detour through its anus, not a joke, we finally encounter Heismay inside his hideout. It's a really cool scene, seeing this bat ninja leap out of the darkness and cut down the human sandworm we just escaped from. When our fight with him begins, he even pops off some shadow clones to demonstrate his wily Eugief nature. As the fight plays out, however, it's clear there's something else going on here. Heismay doesn't really seem to want to hurt the party, even though he's got a bounty on his head.
You've some grand cause to fight for, I'm sure, but I have my own.
Heismay escapes that first fight, and we get a moment to think about the situation. He did just save the party from Homo Butera before the battle began, and upon inspecting his hut, we find a small urn containing some little bones. It looks like he's lost a son of his own. That doesn't really sound like a child kidnapper, does it? Even so, Heismay submits to the party, believing the truth will shake out, and it does. The kidnappings continue even while Heismay is in our custody, so he clearly isn't the real culprit here. What follows is a macabre dungeon crawl through the waterways beneath Martira's Kriegante castle. At the end of that journey is the truth. Lady Joanna lost a child herself, so she's been keeping another disgusting human beneath her castle, feeding it children from the town to keep its monstrous appetite in check. The confrontation with Heismay here is brilliant. There's a cruel irony in him being labeled a kidnapper when he lost his own son before, and yet he only wants to help Joanna snap out of her delusion.
And the child you loved is gone.
Heismay has every right to burn it all down in revenge for what happened to his son, especially after being labeled as a child kidnapper while trying to process his own grief. Joanna's method is obviously not the right path, but defeating her big mouth baby doll thankfully snaps her out of it.
This is where a less discerning writer would put a BetterHelp sponsorship.
The contrast between Heismay and Joanna endears him to the party and the players. He takes the high road and helps another grieving parent in her darkest hour. He even saves the rest of the children he was accused of snatching. And this is just how Heismay's story starts. With Heismay officially added to the party, we can start deepening our bond with him. That's bond with a capital B, by the way. If you're familiar with Persona's social link system, then it's easy to say bonds are basically the same thing here. And if you're not familiar, it's still pretty simple. Spend time with the group's core characters, and you'll get to know them better, unlocking new archetypes and perks along the way. For example, Stroll will open up the warrior tree, while Hulkenberg is tied to the knight.
Once more, I would humbly request your blades at my side.
Heismay is, of course, the keeper of the thief archetype, but it's the details of his bond that really take him to the next level. The Martira arc was a whirlwind of an introduction, but now that Heismay is with us permanently, we can slow down and learn the details. One last look at the Reddit answers will tell you that people really enjoy the dad vibes of this story. It's the same reason people love the Norse god of war games. As the bond begins, the focus is on burying Heismay's son. Along the way, we learn about his history in the Shadow Guard, a secret group of knights that handle the royal dirty work. During a particularly violent riot, Heismay's son was killed by some parapus. Those are the ones with animal ears and tails, and they're only one rung above the Eugief on the societal ladder. Do Heismay's people already harbor a lot of hatred because of their oppressed status? Yes. Does the Parapus riot give Heismay a reason to hate that tribe in particular? Oh yes. But it's from this place of grief that his bond grows in a beautiful way.
If my boy was still alive, he'd be about your age.
Huh. Well, isn't that interesting?
Heismay decides that returning to the Eugief village is the best course of action. His son should be buried in his hometown. Given the tribal tension I keep mentioning, we're not really welcome there ourselves. Heismay's son's urn even gets stolen after he leaves it there. This bat can't catch a break. I won't reveal how this burial arc resolves. I've got to give you some reason to play the game for yourself, right? But I will say that there's a lot to love during the journey there. Like I hinted at a moment ago, Heismay and the protagonist's personal relationship grows in a beautiful way, with our character becoming something of a surrogate son.
Sometimes it's felt as though my son himself has been advising me.
Heismay also continues to be the bigger man, like he did back in Martira with Joanna. He spent a lot of time running away from his problems, stewing in his grief in the sandworm caves, but by joining the party, he resolved to shake that off. He can't just keep dodging in the dark. He has to bring his problems to light. He doesn't want to be defined by the past, one filled with loss and hardship. In fact, that's why he left the Eugief village in the first place. And that's why he makes a concerted effort to push his people out of their isolation through our royal campaign. If we win the throne, they won't have to live a sequestered life any longer, and the violence between tribes can cease. So if you're keeping count, that's 4 big wins for Heismay. Breaking Joanna out of her delusion, laying his son to rest, bonding with the protagonist as a surrogate father, and ushering the Eugief into a new era. And that awful Parapus riot he had to deal with back in the day? Well, adding Basilio to the party in the late game helps him squash that beef too.
It's true, I don't understand you and I never will. But I know I don't hate you, boy.
Heismay Noctual is an incredible character, not just in the context of Metaphor ReFantazio, but for RPGs and video games in general. We just covered 4 major reasons why. From a character design perspective, his bat features make him stand out from moment 1. His sneaky Eugief abilities make him a great addition to the party as the textbook thief. His story starts in a heartbreaking place, as a grieving father who, in a cruel twist of fate, is accused of kidnapping children in the midst of trying to bury his own son. From there, it becomes heartwarming, as he works through this process, becoming a paragon of helping others through his own experience. Lady Joanna, the Eugief tribe, and the protagonist himself all become better people as a result of interacting with Heismay. Whether it's confrontation, encouragement, or surrogate father-son bonding, Heismay's big moments are simply beautiful.
Then let us all survive, that we might protect the new world together.
It takes big moments to answer big questions. I've done my best to condense why everyone loves Heismay here, but there are even more takeaways in my Reddit thread. I encourage you to take a look there, and to pick up Metaphor for yourself if you haven't already. Every major character has an incredible story arc like this, thanks to a bond system that encourages players to get to know party members and NPC supporters alike. There's a story that'll touch your heart somewhere in there. I just know it.
To us, to my son, and to the children, and their future.
Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what I'm doing here on Framework, please hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to check out what I've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.